Welcome to Arts and Entertainment Ministries and our series on the Ten Commandments for artists and creative professionals. Now today we're going to talk about the second commandment, which is the one commandment that directly speaks to the concerns of how we create art and how we are to view art. So let's begin by reading the verse from Exodus 20, verse 4. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. Now, in many ways, this can feel like an obscure text for today's culture, especially in the Western world where we don't worship shrines in public, nor do we buy idols in our local shopping mall and believe these idols will make us rich or fertile or protect us from evil. In many ways, it is more subtle in our modern culture. But consider this. Have you ever heard someone who's been thankful for surviving a catastrophic event, and they say, knock on wood, and then proceed to find a place to wrap their knuckles on wood? Don't you wonder why people hit a piece of wood and think that's related to saving their life? Well, the origin is a German folklore that portrays dryads or tree nymphs as spirits living in the trees. The idea is if you knock on the trees, those spirits will protect you. Now here's another funny saying that goes back to the early days in theater in the 1920s. Since then, it's been a tradition when an actor goes on stage to give him or her a little encouragement. But it doesn't sound like encouragement. The phrase is spoken, break a leg. Now this negative statement that almost feels like a curse comes from the belief and the superstition that wishing someone well would jinx the actor. So in order to prevent bad spirits who would thwart your good wishes, actors say, break a leg, as a superstitious trick to fool the evil spirits. Since there's nothing good to oppose, the evil spirits leave them alone, and they have a great performance. Now you see, whether it's knocking on wood or saying, break a leg, there are superstitions that contain the idea that there are spirits or little gods who we have to appease. And if not appease, then we must trick them into leaving us alone. But either way, we're speaking in such a way as to give recognition to some other spirit instead of God. Now, while these superstitions are subtle, there are other superstitions that are more obvious. And we can read in Scripture and in other ancient texts about superstitions from the ancient world, the ancient Egyptian, Babylonian, Greek, and Roman gods. In many cases, these religions embraced the fashioning of physical statues for the purpose of worship. And the superstitious belief was that if you appease the god through worship and sacrifice, you get the harvest you want, the fertility you long for, the victory in battle for your king, whatever it is. And these superstitious cults may be more elaborate than the sayings that live on today, but at the core, they're no different. God didn't rescue them from Egypt for them to live as if Pharaoh is still a god. He's telling them here, worship only me. Don't keep any customs or traditions that point to the Egyptian gods and pharaohs of today, the Philistine and Canaanite gods of tomorrow, or even the Babylonian Assyrian gods you're going to encounter centuries from now. Don't copy their culture and don't worship their gods. Is the issue the artwork? Some people think the commandment is simply about making of statues. However, the context in the book of Exodus shows us that crafting the likeness of anything above in heaven or below on earth can't be the point. If we look only a few chapters later in the same book of Exodus, we see God is speaking to Moses from the same Mount Sinai where he gave that second commandment, and we read this, Then the Lord said to Moses, See, I have chosen Bezalel, son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God, with skill, ability, and knowledge in all kinds of crafts, to make artistic designs for work in gold and silver and bronze, to cut and set stones, to work in wood, and to engage in all kinds of craftsmanship. The fascinating issue here is that the second commandment states explicitly, do not make images, and yet a few chapters later, we see God using the same exact Hebrew word to make, calling them to make artistic designs of things in heaven, like cherubim and their wings over the Ark of the Covenant, things like blossoms and vegetation that are on earth. And this model never changes. Centuries later, we see that when the Israelites erected Solomon's temple, they added even more examples of vegetation, angelic beings, as well as lions and oxen. And these were all acceptable to God and never once condemned in Scripture. We see at first that the commandment to not make images and the command here to make artwork for the tabernacle seem to be contradicting each other. But if we look closer, we can see something else in the verse that makes all the difference in the second commandment. You see, at the end of the verse, we read, "You shall not bow down to them or serve them." God was never anti-art. God was simply anti-art worship. So if you picture Jesus walking through the Getty, the National Gallery in London, or the Louvre in Paris, he wouldn't be opposed to all the great art everywhere. What would upset Jesus would be if people started kneeling before the artwork and praying to the Mona Lisa, or to the Starry Nights of Van Gogh, or burning incense to a painting at the Last Supper. Why would Jesus be upset? Not because the paintings were so moving, or powerful, but because people were worshiping the art. You see, we have to step back and remind ourselves where idolatry comes from. The problem is not something external, but something internal. As Jesus himself said, "It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth. This defiles them." From Matthew chapter 15. You see, the problem is what comes out of our hearts. Pride and lust and sloth and idolatry. Lazy boy chairs don't cause sloth, and great restaurants don't cause gluttony. Beautiful people don't cause lust. Giving someone trophies doesn't cause pride, and art does not cause idolatry. Martin Luther and John Calvin correctly pointed out that our hearts are idol factories. We're prone to worship almost anything. Our hearts can worship power or money, food, physical fitness, artistic creativity, and accolades like getting a Grammy or an Oscar or an Emmy. See, the real issue is the heart. Is God first in our heart, or something else? You know, the Egyptian idols were simply artifacts meant to encourage idolatry. They had no real power. Think of this. Imagine archaeologists uncovering idols today. They don't find themselves uncontrollably worshiping and bowing down before them. If that was true, no Christian should ever be involved in archaeology. No. They dust them off, record them, ship them to a museum to be viewed as an artifact. Because that's all they are. These statues have no intrinsic power. The power to worship them is a choice we make. And that decision resides completely within the human heart. Now, some people have taken the second commandment almost as a caution against beautiful things in general. This is why their homes and even their sanctuary, their churches, can be boring or ugly or have minimal decoration. But this misses the very way in which God uses beauty to point to himself. If we read Psalm 19, we see, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard, and their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world." You see, the beauty of creation always meant to move us and to point us to the beauty of our Creator. Beauty has never been the problem either. And it's important to note, creation does not have a scripture emblazoned on every leaf of a tree or each planet when you look at them through a telescope. God doesn't need everything to be explicitly pointing to him. He's fine with being implicit. Theologians know this and call it general revelation. A Christian is the one who can recognize the beauty of all creation, celebrate this beauty God has given us, and then imitate God by creating beautiful gardens, music, beautiful cities, and beautiful artwork. Celebrate all God has created, from flowers to beasts of the field to cherubim. And the only real caveat is this: don't worship anything you create. Don't worship anyone but God alone. We see the challenge is this: we need to recognize all beauty as an echo of the glory of God, wherever it's found. Consider this: I can be moved powerfully by the beauty and majesty of a lion standing before me. And I'm not tempted to worship the lion. In fact, God calls himself the Lion of Judah, but no one's out there worshiping lions. Just because something is beautiful doesn't mean it causes us to worship. The same is true of these statues, or of sunsets, or films, or other art. You see, it is the superstitious man or woman who thinks the power of the work of art lies in the actual marble or in the oil pigments. The wise person recognizes that artwork is simply a conversation. After all, Christ himself spoke in parables and word pictures about shepherds, good Samaritans, and vineyards. And these rich pictures point us to something deeper about the nature of God. But only a complete fool would think Christ wanted you to go out and worship vines and vineyards, or Samaritans, or even shepherds. Now think of this. C.S. Lewis, the profound Christian author, was originally a pantheist and a pagan. In his early years, he thought the power of beauty was in the trees, and the stories we read, and the world around him. And his conversation highlights the difference. When he described his conversion in The Weight of Glory, this is what C.S. Lewis said. The books or music in which we thought beauty was located will betray us if we trust to them. It was not in them, it only came through them. And what came through them was longing. For they are not the thing itself. They are only the scent of a flower we have not found, the echo of a tune we have not heard, and news from a country we have never yet visited. So what does this really mean for you as an artist? It means you have freedom to paint and draw, design products, sculpt, and make films about anything. The second commandment simply tells us not to encourage or lead others to worship anything besides God. Now, for those of you who are famous, you have a unique struggle in our celebrity culture, and people may begin to idolize you and your art. And in this case, the best person for you to look to is Johann Sebastian Bach. You see, when Bach finished writing and composing his music, he wrote at the bottom the letters SDG, which stood for Soli Deo Gloria, or Glory Goes to God Alone. Why did he do this? He was reminding himself and his audience that all of his talents were a gift from God. So, whether you're famous or not, I want you to be encouraged and don't ever stop making the best art you can. At the same time, don't ever stop thinking, how can we give the glory back to God? This is what the second commandment is really all about. Now, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, click the subscribe button, and if you have any questions or comments, just place those down below, and we look forward to continuing the discussion.